Captain Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of the research vessel Horizon's Edge and watched the impossible sight before him. 3 massive alien ships hung in space like floating cities, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their surfaces gleamed with materials that seemed to shift color in the starlight, and strange symbols pulsed along their hulls in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Bo-Ram Shin from the communication station. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and fear that everyone on the bridge shared. "Put it through," Hyunwoo ordered, straightening his uniform. This was the moment that would change everything for humanity. The main screen flickered and showed a being unlike anything from Earth's wildest imagination. It stood nearly 3 meters tall with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Its eyes were large and silver, and when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "Greetings, children of Earth," the alien said. "I am Speaker Thane Velros of the Galactic Council. We have watched your species with great interest as you took your first steps into the void between stars." Commander Ji-eun Kim stepped forward from her position at the tactical station. She had been chosen for this mission specifically because of her military background and her ability to ask the hard questions that diplomats might avoid. "Speaker Velros, we're honored by your contact. May I ask what brings the Galactic Council to our small corner of space?" The alien's expression shifted into what might have been a smile, though it was difficult to tell with features so different from human ones. "Direct and practical as we expected from your species. We come with an offer that no civilization in galactic history has ever refused." The screen changed to show a vast star map with thousands of points of light, each one representing a different world. For over 10,000 of your years, the Galactic Council has maintained peace across this galaxy. We are composed of 47 different species, each contributing their unique strengths to ensure that war, suffering, and extinction are things of the past. Hyunwoo felt his heart rate increase as the implications began to sink in. "You're offering us membership in this council?" "More than that," Thane Velros replied. "We offer you protection. Complete and absolute protection from any threat that might arise in this dangerous universe." The display changed again, showing Earth surrounded by a protective barrier of council ships. "Your world will be designated as protected status under the Council's Eternal Guard Protocol. This means that no hostile force will ever be able to threaten your people again. Our fleets, which have never known defeat, will stand as an eternal shield around your world." From her position near the navigation console, Dr. Yoon Bi-song raised her hand hesitantly. As the mission xenobiologist, she had been studying every aspect of alien contact protocols for years. "Speaker, what would this protection require from humanity?" "An excellent question," the alien replied. "The requirements are simple and reasonable. First, your species must surrender all military spacecraft and weapons manufacturing capabilities. These primitive tools of war will no longer be necessary under our protection." Jian Kim's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "You're asking us to completely disarm?" "We are offering to make your weapons obsolete," Thane Velros corrected gently. "Why would you need crude missiles and kinetic weapons when you have the most advanced military force in the galaxy standing guard over your world?" The screen now showed massive council warships that dwarfed Earth's largest vessels. Their weapons batteries could be seen clearly, arrays of devices that pulsed with contained energy. "Each of our dreadnoughts carries the firepower to sterilize an entire planet. Our smallest patrol craft outguns your most powerful battleships. In the face of such protection, your weapons are not just unnecessary, they are primitive curiosities." Hyunwoo exchanged glances with his senior officers. The logic was undeniable, but something about the situation felt wrong. "And the second requirement, your species must agree to follow Council guidelines regarding population growth, resource extraction, and technological development. These guidelines ensure that protected worlds develop in harmony with galactic civilization standards." Dr. Yoon Bi-song leaned forward. "What exactly do these guidelines entail?" The alien's silver eyes seemed to gleam brighter. "Nothing restrictive, I assure you. Simply reasonable limits to ensure sustainable growth and prevent the kind of aggressive expansion that leads to conflict." Protected worlds typically stabilize at optimal population levels and focus their energies on art, culture, and peaceful sciences, rather than the crude business of warfare. Ji-un Kim couldn't stay quiet any longer. And if we refuse this protection, the first time, Thane Velros's expression showed something that might have been sadness. Then your species will face the universe alone, as so many others have before you. The void between stars is filled with dangers that young civilizations cannot imagine. Rogue AI systems, predatory species, cosmic disasters, resource wars between established powers. Without protection, few species survive their first century in space. The screen changed to show the remnants of dead civilizations. Empty worlds, shattered space stations, the debris fields where once great fleets had made their final stands. These were all species that refused our protection. They believed, as you might, that they could face the galaxy's dangers alone. None succeeded. The weight of the decision hung heavy in the recycled air of the ship. Hyunwoo looked around at his crew, seeing the same mix of hope and uncertainty on every face. The offer was everything humanity could have dreamed of, but it came with a price that felt impossibly high. How long do we have to consider this offer? Hyunwoo asked. Take all the time you need, Thane Velros replied. We will remain in your system while your leaders deliberate. However, I should mention that there are other forces in this region of space that have taken notice of your recent expansion. It would be unfortunate if you were to encounter them before accepting our protection. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. For several minutes, nobody spoke as they processed what they had just witnessed. Finally, Ji-un Kim broke the silence. Sir, I recommend extreme caution. Something about this feels wrong. What specifically? Hyunwoo asked, though he shared her concerns. The timing, for one thing. They appear just as we're expanding our space presence, claiming they've been watching us but only making contact now. And this requirement to disarm completely feels like conquest disguised as protection. Dr. Yoonbi Song nodded in agreement. The biological imperative of any species is to maintain the capacity for self-defense. Asking us to give that up goes against every evolutionary instinct. But Lieutenant Boram Shin shook her head. With respect, we saw their ships. If they wanted to conquer us, they could do it right now without asking permission. Why go through this elaborate process of offering protection? The debate continued as they prepared their report for Earth. Within hours, every major government on the planet was debating the Council's offer. President Dong-hyun Lee called emergency sessions with world leaders, while Defense Minister Sun Ja-han consulted with military advisors about humanity's chances of survival without Council protection. The discussions lasted for weeks. Scientists analyzed every piece of data they could gather about Council technology. Military leaders ran countless simulations of potential conflicts with alien forces. Philosophers debated the moral implications of surrendering humanity's independence for safety. In the end, it was Admiral Kyung-Soo Yoon who provided the decisive argument. Standing before the combined assembly of world leaders, he laid out the brutal mathematics of the situation. Our most advanced warships are powered by fusion reactors, he said. Their patrol boats appear to use controlled singularities as power sources. Our weapons fire projectiles at a fraction of light speed. Their weapons manipulate space-time itself. The technological gap is not just significant, it's insurmountable. The vote was close, but it was final. Humanity would accept the Galactic Council's protection. The dismantling began immediately. Earth's space navy, built with such pride over the past 50 years, was systematically destroyed under Council supervision. Weapons manufacturing facilities were converted to peaceful purposes. The orbital defense platforms that had been humanity's first line of defense were reduced to scrap metal. Throughout the process, only one voice continued to object. Tai-Yang Choi, a brilliant military engineer who had designed many of humanity's most advanced weapons, refused to accept the decision. We're making a mistake, he told Admiral Kyung-Soo Yoon during the final phases of disarmament. A species that gives up the ability to defend itself has given up the right to exist. But his warnings fell on deaf ears. The Galactic Council's protection was everything they had promised. Trade flourished, technology advanced in peaceful directions, and for the first time in human history, war seemed to be truly obsolete. 3 years passed in unprecedented peace and prosperity. Humanity began to believe that they had made the right choice, that the age of conflict was finally over. They were wrong. Dr. Yunbi Song floated in the zero-gravity laboratory of the Council Science Station Nexus Prime, carefully examining tissue samples from a species she had never encountered before. The samples were labeled as coming from the Kethmori system, a region that the Council claimed had been recently discovered. But something about the cellular structure troubled her. 3 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council's protection program. Earth had flourished under the agreement, with technology advancing rapidly and conflicts becoming a thing of the past. Yunbi had been selected as one of 12 human scientists to work directly with Council research teams, studying xenobiology at facilities throughout their territory. The work was fascinating, but lately she had begun to notice disturbing patterns in the specimens she was asked to analyze. Many of them showed signs of genetic manipulation, as if someone had been selectively breeding different species for specific traits. When she asked her supervisor, a tall reptilian scientist named Korath Vass, about the unusual genetic markers, he dismissed her concerns as the result of natural evolutionary pressures. But Unbi had spent her entire career studying evolutionary biology, and what she saw in these samples didn't match any natural process she understood. She was preparing to run another test when her workstation chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Dr. Zeleth Narn, a Council researcher she had worked with several times. But when she opened the file, the message seemed garbled, as if it had been corrupted during transmission. Yunbi frowned and ran the message through several decryption protocols, thinking it might be a simple technical error. But as the data reorganized itself on her screen, she realized that the corruption was intentional. Someone had deliberately encoded the message to look like random static. Her hands trembled as she worked to decode the hidden information. When the process finally completed, she stared in horror at what appeared on her screen. The message contained detailed shipping manifests from something called the Harvest Operations Division. The documents listed thousands of species by name, along with population counts, genetic classifications, and something labeled as extraction schedules. Most disturbing of all, she recognized many of the species names from her own research samples. At the bottom of the manifest was a note that made her blood run cold. Terran extraction scheduled for cycle 847. Population at optimal harvesting. Density. Genetic compliance satisfactory. Proceed with standard demoralization protocol. Yunbi quickly copied the files to a secure partition and deleted the original message. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she had discovered. The Council wasn't protecting Earth. They were preparing to harvest it. She spent the next several hours carefully searching through the station's databases, using her legitimate research access to look for more information about the Harvest Operations Division. What she found was even more horrifying than she had feared. The Galactic Council was not a benevolent alliance of peaceful species. It was a sophisticated farming operation that spanned the entire galaxy. They would identify promising young civilizations and offer them protection in exchange for complete disarmament. Once a species was defenseless and had reached optimal population levels, the Council would stage a fake invasion by controlled forces. The Council's own fleets would arrive too, late to prevent the tragedy, but just in time to witness the complete destruction of another unfortunate civilization. The surviving population would be quietly transferred to various buyers throughout the galaxy, sold as slaves, soldiers, or worse, depending on their genetic characteristics. The most chilling discovery was a detailed psychological profile of humanity that described them as exceptionally suitable for military applications due to their aggressive nature and adaptability under stress. The document went on to note that human specimens commanded premium prices in the gladiatorial markets of the Outer Rim. Yunbi's hands shook as she copied everything she could find onto a secure data crystal. She had to warn Earth, but she knew that the Council monitored all official communication channels. Any attempt to send a direct message would be intercepted and blocked. Instead, she composed what appeared to be a routine scientific report addressed to her brother Wanbin, who worked as a data analyst for Earth's agricultural ministry. But, hidden within the mundane discussion of soil bacteria and crop yields was a coded message that only Wanbin would understand. It was a childhood cipher they had developed as kids, based on the first letters of seemingly random words throughout the text. She transmitted the message through the station's regular scientific data exchange, hoping it would appear routine enough to avoid scrutiny. But as she watched the transmission status, her heart sank. The message had been flagged for additional screening by Council security protocols. Within minutes, armed Council guards appeared at her laboratory door. Korath Vass stood with them, his reptilian features showing what might have been sadness or disappointment. "Dr. Song," he said in his synthesized voice, "I'm afraid there's been a security breach in your workstation. We'll need to conduct a full investigation." Yunbi forced herself to remain calm. "Of course I'll cooperate fully. Should I secure my current research samples?" "That won't be necessary," Korath replied. "You'll be transferred to a secure facility while we resolve this matter." As the guards escorted her from the laboratory, Yunbi caught a glimpse of her workstation screen. Her heart pounded as she saw that her message to Wanbin had been marked as "transmission successful," just before the security lockdown had taken effect. She could only hope that her brother would understand the warning in time. Meanwhile on Earth, Wanbin Song sat in his small office at the Ministry of Agriculture, reviewing routine reports from off-world research stations. His sister's message arrived in the regular batch of scientific data, and at first glance it appeared to be nothing more than a standard xenobiology report about soil microorganisms. But as he read through the document, certain words began to jump out at him. Hidden within discussions of bacterial classifications and growth rates was a message that made his blood run cold. Danger, council, lies, harvest, ships, coming soon, warn, everyone trust, no, one. Wanbin read the message 3 more times to be sure he wasn't imagining it. His sister had always been careful and methodical, never given to paranoia or wild theories. If she was sending coded warnings, the situation had to be desperate. He immediately tried to contact the official government liaison office for council relations, but something stopped him. If the council was monitoring communications as Yunbi suggested, then going through official channels would only alert them that their secret had been discovered. Instead, Wanbin made a decision that would save humanity. He used his agricultural ministry access codes to schedule what appeared to be a routine inspection of a grain storage facility outside Seoul, but instead of conducting the inspection, he drove directly to the private residence of Admiral Kyung-soo. Yoon, the admiral, had been quietly expressing concerns about humanity's complete dependence on council protection ever since the disarmament had been completed. Unlike most government officials who had embraced the new era of peace and prosperity, Kyung-soo had never fully trusted the alien alliance. Wanbin found the admiral working in his garden, tending to vegetables that his wife had planted before her death the previous year. When Wanbin explained what his sister had discovered, Kyung-soo's face grew grave. "Are you certain about this information?" the admiral asked. Wanbin showed him the decoded message and explained how the cipher worked. Kyung-soo studied it carefully, his military mind already beginning to process the implications. "If this is true, we have very little time to prepare," the admiral said, "and we have no weapons, no ships, no defenses of any kind." "What about the black projects?" Wanbin asked. "Surely some military research continued in secret after the disarmament?" Kyung-soo was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. "There was one project that I authorized to continue in violation of the council agreement. A small group of engineers led by Tae-yang Choi have been working on theoretical starship designs. I told myself it was just research, that we would never build anything." "Can they build something now?" The admiral looked up at the sky, where council ships could occasionally be seen passing overhead like distant stars. "I don't know. But we're about to find out, because if your sister is right, it's our only chance." That evening, Kyung-soo made a series of carefully encrypted calls to individuals he had known and trusted for decades. Each conversation was brief and used coded language that would seem innocent to casual observers. But the message was clear. Humanity was in danger and they needed to act immediately. Within 48 hours, a small group of military officers, scientists, and engineers had quietly assembled at an abandoned mining facility in the mountains of South Korea. Among them were Tae-yang Choi, the brilliant engineer who had never stopped believing that humanity needed the ability to defend itself. Mi-young Seo, a propulsion specialist who had been working on advanced drive theories, and Chang-min An, a weapons designer who had spent the past 3 years dreaming of systems that could challenge alien technology. As they gathered in the cold concrete facility, the abandoned mining facility in the Korean mountains had been transformed into something that would have terrified the Galactic Council if they had known of its existence. Deep underground, hidden from orbital scans, and protected by layers of electromagnetic shielding, humanity's last hope was taking shape. Tae-yang Choi stood before a massive holographic display, showing the technical specifications of their secret project. The ship they were building looked unlike anything in Council records, because it had been designed according to principles that peaceful species had never needed to learn. The Iron Resolve, he announced to the assembled team of engineers and scientists. She'll be our answer to 10,000 years of galactic arrogance. Mi-young Seo studied the propulsion systems with a mix of admiration and concern. Tae-yang, these power requirements are beyond anything we've ever attempted. The fusion reactors alone would need to operate at 90% of theoretical maximum just to power the basic systems. That's why we're not using fusion reactors, Tae-yang replied with a grim smile. Show them, Chang-min. Chang-min An activated another section of the holographic display, revealing a power system that made several of the engineers step backward in alarm. At the heart of the ship was something that looked more like a controlled bomb than a power source. We're using contained antimatter annihilation, Chang-min explained. Not just as a power source, but as a weapon system. If the containment fails, the ship becomes a multi-megaton explosion. Dr. Hee-jin Ko, the team's systems integration specialist, shook her head. That's insane. One containment breach and we vaporize ourselves along with anything within 50 kilometers. Exactly, Tae-yang said. That's what makes it perfect. Council species think in terms of self-preservation first, victory second. They'll never expect us to build a ship that's designed to be a suicide weapon if necessary. Admiral Kyung-soo Yoon, who had been quietly observing from the back of the group, stepped forward. Explain the tactical doctrine. Tae-yang manipulated the display to show combat scenarios. The Council relies on standardized tactics because they've never faced serious opposition. Their ships are designed for overwhelming firepower and heavy defense, but they assume their enemies will follow conventional engagement patterns. The display showed how traditional space battles played out. Fleets would approach each other at long range, exchange massive volleys of weapons fire, and the side with superior technology and numbers would eventually prevail through attrition. Dantar, Iron Resolve doesn't play by those rules, Tae-yang continued. She's designed for close-range fighting, hit-and-run tactics, and adaptive warfare. Every system on the ship can be reconfigured during combat based on what we learn about enemy capabilities. Young-suk Kim, the artificial intelligence specialist, highlighted the ship's computer systems. The AI core isn't just a navigation and targeting computer. It's designed to analyze enemy tactics in real time and develop countermeasures on the fly. The longer a battle goes on, the more dangerous we become. The technical briefing continued for hours as each team member explained their contributions to the project. Sang-ho Lee had developed quantum tunneling torpedoes that could phase through conventional shields. Jae-won Park had created adaptive hull plating that could reconfigure itself to absorb different types of energy weapons. Won-bin Song, working with agricultural ministry resources, had even found ways to disguise their material acquisitions as routine terraforming supplies. But the most revolutionary aspect of the design was its modular construction philosophy. Unlike council ships, which were built as integrated systems, the Iron Resolve was designed to continue fighting even after suffering catastrophic damage. Look at this, Mi-young said, manipulating the display to show the ship's internal structure. Every major system has at least 3 redundant backups, but they're not identical copies. Each backup uses different technology and different approaches to achieve the same function. Changmin nodded enthusiastically. If they destroy our main weapon systems, the backup weapons activate with completely different operational parameters. If they adapt their defenses to our energy weapons, we switch to kinetic systems. If they counter our kinetic weapons, we use exotic matter manipulation. Admiral Kyung-soo studied the design carefully. What about crew survivability? The room fell quiet. Finally, Tae-young answered. Sir, crew survivability was not a primary design consideration. The ship is built to complete its mission regardless of crew status. The admission hung heavy in the air. Everyone in the room understood what that meant, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. The Iron Resolve was designed as a weapon of last resort built by people who knew they might not survive to see victory. How long until she's operational? Kyung-soo asked. 6 months for the basic hull and power systems, Mi-young replied. Another 3 months for weapons integration and testing. But sir, we still need a crew. I'll handle crew selection, the admiral said. Focus on construction. Over the following weeks, the project consumed everyone involved. Working in shifts around the clock, the team began fabricating components using a network of small manufacturing facilities scattered across 3 continents. Each facility produced only small, seemingly innocuous parts that would appear harmless to Council monitoring systems. The antimatter containment system was built disguised as a medical research reactor. The quantum torpedo launchers were assembled as components for a deep space communications array. The adaptive hull plating was manufactured as advanced solar panel materials for orbital installations. But the most challenging aspect was keeping the project secret while acquiring the enormous amounts of exotic materials needed for construction. Bin's agricultural connections proved invaluable, as he used terraforming supply contracts to obtain rare metals and high-energy compounds. Dr. Hye-jin Ko developed an ingenious logistics system that distributed the construction across dozens of locations while ensuring that no single facility could be identified as militarily significant. Components were assembled in mining tunnels, abandoned subway systems, and decommissioned industrial complexes scattered across the globe. The work was dangerous and exhausting. Several team members suffered radiation exposure while testing the antimatter systems. Others were injured in industrial accidents while working with unfamiliar alien technologies reverse-engineered from Council trade samples. But slowly, impossibly, the Iron Resolve began to take shape. Young-suk Kim worked 18-hour days programming the ship's AI core with combat algorithms based on every military conflict in human history. The system was designed to learn from Sun Tzu's art of war, Napoleon's tactical innovations, and modern asymmetric warfare techniques all simultaneously. The AI doesn't think like Council battle computers, she explained during one of their late-night planning sessions. Council systems are programmed to minimize casualties and achieve objectives with maximum efficiency. Our system is programmed to win at any cost. Sang-Ho Lee's quantum torpedoes presented their own challenges. The weapons could phase through conventional matter, making them nearly impossible to intercept, but they required precise targeting to maintain quantum coherence during flight. Each torpedo has to be individually calibrated for the target's quantum signature, he explained while running tests on a miniaturized version of the system. But once they're locked on, there's no known defense against them. Meanwhile, Chang-min was solving the problem of adaptive weapon systems. His design allowed the ship to reconfigure its entire weapons array in less than 30 seconds, switching between energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, exotic matter manipulation, and even more esoteric systems based on gravitational distortion. The breakthrough moment came when they conducted the first integrated systems test. Deep in a reinforced underground chamber, they activated a scale model of the Iron Resolve's power and weapon systems. The results exceeded everyone's expectations and terrified most of the engineering team. The antimatter reactor achieved stable containment and produced energy output levels that were theoretically impossible, according to Council physics textbooks. The adaptive systems successfully reconfigured themselves through 17 different operational modes in less than 2 minutes, and the quantum weapon system managed to phase a test projectile through 6 meters of solid rock without disturbing the intervening matter. But the most shocking result came when they tested the ship's combat AI. Given a simulated battle scenario against a Council dreadnought, the AI developed a winning strategy in 4.7 seconds. The strategy involved using the ship's own antimatter reactor as a weapon, deliberately allowing containment to fail in a controlled manner that would vaporize both ships while ensuring maximum damage to nearby enemy vessels. "It's learning," Young-suk whispered as they reviewed the AI's tactical analysis. "It's actually learning to think like us." The test was considered a complete success, but it also revealed a troubling side effect. The weapon's discharge had created what appeared to be a brief artificial star, visible for several seconds before burning out. The energy signature was unlike anything previously recorded, and they realized that their weapons were more powerful than they had intended. Admiral Kyung-so, the invasion fleet appeared without warning on a Tuesday morning, emerging from hyperspace like a plague of mechanical locusts. Thousands of dark ships filled the space around Earth, their hulls bearing the twisted symbols of species that had been extinct for centuries. They moved in perfect formation, blocking out stars and casting shadows across entire continents. Captain Yunwoo Park stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, hidden in the shadow of the moon's far side, watching the nightmare unfold on his tactical displays. The enemy ships were exactly what Dr. Yunbi Song's intelligence had predicted. Vessels from harvested civilizations, controlled by Council AI systems, and crewed by enslaved populations, forced to participate in their own species' destruction. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead invasion vessel," reported Communications Officer Bo Ram Shin, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Put it through," Hyunwoo ordered, though he already knew what they would hear. The main screen flickered to life, showing a being that had once been beautiful, but was now clearly broken. Its species had elongated limbs and graceful features that spoke of a peaceful evolution, but its eyes held the empty stare of the mentally enslaved. "People of Earth," the creature said in a voice devoid of emotion, "you will surrender immediately. Your planetary defenses will be deactivated, and your population will prepare for processing. Resistance will result in unnecessary suffering." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in grim silence. Everyone present knew that this was exactly how the Council's harvesting operations began: overwhelming force, demands for immediate surrender, and the promise that cooperation would reduce suffering. Within minutes, another transmission came through, this one from Speaker Thane Velros of the Galactic Council. The alien's expression showed what appeared to be genuine sadness and regret. "Children of Earth, I bring tragic news. Despite our best efforts, our fleets were delayed by a massive stellar phenomenon in the Rigel system. We are moving at maximum speed to reach your world, but I fear we may be too late to prevent this catastrophe." President Dong-hyun Lee's response came through official channels within the hour. Instead of the expected plea for help or surrender, his message shocked both the invaders and the Council observers. "Speaker Velros, thank you for your concern, but it won't be necessary. 3 years ago, humanity discovered the truth about your protection racket. We know about the harvesting operations, the enslaved crews, and the fake invasions. We also know that Cycle 847 was supposed to be Earth's turn." The president's image filled screens across Earth as he continued his broadcast. "You offered us protection, and we accepted, but we never stopped being human, and humans don't go quietly into extinction." As if summoned by his words, the Iron Resolve emerged from behind the moon, her hull gleaming with exotic materials and bristling with weapons that had never been seen before in galactic warfare. She moved with fluid grace despite her massive size, her adaptive systems already analyzing the enemy fleet and preparing countermeasures. On the ship's bridge, Commander Ji-Eun Kim coordinated the tactical response, while Chief Engineer Mi Young CO monitored the exotic systems that kept them operational. "All systems green, Captain. The antimatter reactor is stable and weapons are charged." "Tactical analysis?" Hyunwoo asked. "Approximately 3,000 enemy vessels, ranging from fighters to heavy cruisers," Ji-Eun reported. "Standard Council-era technology, but modified with slave control systems. Most crews are operating under neural compulsion. The odds were..." impossible by any conventional measure. But the Iron Resolve had not been built for conventional warfare. As the enemy fleet moved to intercept, Yunwu gave the order that would begin humanity's most desperate gamble. All stations execute Protocol Omega. We're going hunting. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The Iron Resolve didn't engage the enemy fleet in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, she dove directly into the heart of their formation, her adaptive hull-absorbing energy weapons while her quantum torpedoes phased through enemy shields to strike at vital systems. The ship's AI, programmed with every lesson of human warfare, coordinated attacks that seemed chaotic but were actually precisely calculated to maximize psychological impact. Weapons fired in patterns designed to create fear and confusion rather than just destroy targets. The Iron Resolve would appear to be critically damaged, drawing enemies into close range, then suddenly reconfigure her entire weapons array to unleash devastating close-quarters fire. "They're trying to box us in," Ji-Yoon reported as enemy formations moved to surround them. "Let them," Yunwu replied calmly. "Execute maneuver Custer." The ship suddenly went dark, appearing to lose power and begin drifting helplessly. Dozens of enemy vessels moved in for what they thought would be an easy kill. Instead, they found themselves caught in a trap as the Iron Resolve's weapon systems came back online simultaneously, firing in all directions with weapons that had been secretly charging during the apparent power failure. The psychological warfare was just as effective as the physical destruction. Enemy crews already operating under mental compulsion began to break down as they witnessed tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Ships began firing on their own allies as their enslaved crews fought against their programming. But the most terrifying moment came when a group of enemy heavy cruisers managed to inflict serious damage on the Iron Resolve's hull. As emergency, alarms blared and entire sections vented atmosphere. The ship's response was to become more dangerous, not less. "Hull breach in sections 12 through 15, Mi-young reported. "We're losing structural integrity. Activate combat reconfiguration," Hyunwoo ordered. The damaged sections of the ship were deliberately jettisoned but not as debris. Each section had been preloaded with antimatter charges and programmed to seek out enemy targets. The Iron Resolve had literally turned her own wounds into weapons. The sight of a ship that became more lethal as it took damage sent panic through the enemy ranks. This violated every assumption about how space combat was supposed to work. Species were supposed to retreat when damaged, seek repairs, minimize casualties. They weren't supposed to weaponize their own destruction. As the battle raged across the solar system, the Iron Resolve led the enemy fleet on what Captain Hyunwoo called the Long Hunt. She would strike at enemy formations, inflict maximum damage, then disappear behind asteroids or into the shadows of planets before emerging somewhere else entirely. The ship's quantum torpedoes proved especially effective against enemy morale. The weapons could phase through any known defense, making it impossible for enemy crews to feel safe even behind their strongest shields. Worse, the torpedoes were programmed to target life support systems specifically, ensuring that enemy crews died slowly and horribly while broadcasting their death screams across all frequencies. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Council fleet," Boram reported. "They say they've arrived to provide assistance." On the main screen, Speaker Thane Velros appeared again, but this time his expression was one of barely concealed fury rather than regret. "Captain Park, you will cease hostilities immediately. The Galactic Council is prepared to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this conflict." Hyunwoo's response was broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in the bow system could hear it. "Speaker Velros, there's nothing to negotiate. You came here to harvest my species and sell them as slaves. We're going to kill every single one of your ships, and then we're coming for you." The Council fleet, which had been expecting to arrive at a conquered world ready for processing, instead found themselves facing a single human ship standing alone in a field of wreckage. The space around Earth was littered with the debris of over 1,000 enemy vessels, and the Iron Resolve, though heavily damaged, was still operational and still fighting. What happened next would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Council Admiral Korax Thule commanding the rescue fleet, ordered the immediate surrender of the human vessel. Hyunwoo's response was to launch every remaining weapon the Iron Resolve possessed directly at the Council flagship. The quantum torpedoes phased through the massive ship's shields and detonated inside the command section, killing Admiral Korax Thule and his entire senior staff instantly. The other Council vessels, which had been maintaining formation around their flagship, suddenly found themselves leaderless and under attack by weapons they couldn't defend against. But the Iron Resolve was running out of time. The antimatter containment system, damaged in the earlier battle, was beginning to fail. Mi Young worked desperately to maintain the delicate magnetic fields that kept the ship's power source from vaporizing everything within a 100-kilometer radius. "Sir, I can't hold containment much longer," she reported. "We need to evacuate or we're all going to die when this thing goes critical." Hyunwoo looked around the bridge at his crew, these brave people who had volunteered for a mission they knew might be suicide. Then he looked at the tactical display showing the remaining Council ships still threatening Earth. "New plan," he announced calmly. "Jiun, plot a collision course with the largest remaining Council vessel. Mi Young, I need you to maintain containment for exactly 30 more seconds, then let it fail." The Council's response to the Iron Resolve's sacrifice came exactly 72 hours after the battle ended. Admiral Korax Thule's replacement, a being called Supreme Commander Velkrath, arrived with the largest fleet that had ever entered Earth's solar system. Over 10,000 ships of various classes filled space from Mercury to Jupiter, their combined firepower capable of reducing entire star systems to cosmic dust. The transmission came through on all frequencies simultaneously, ensuring that every human on Earth would witness what was meant to be their final surrender. "Primitive humans," Velkrath's synthesized voice echoed across the planet, "your resistance ends now. You have violated the sacred laws of galactic civilization by destroying Council vessels and murdering their crews. Surrender immediately and accept processing, or we will sterilize your entire world." The response came not from Earth's government, but from a coordinates point in space that had appeared empty on all Council sensors. Suddenly, 15 ships materialized as their cloaking systems deactivated simultaneously. Each one was identical to the Iron Resolve in basic design, but their hulls bore the scars and modifications that spoke of hasty construction and desperate innovation. Admiral Kyung-Soo Yoon's voice carried across the void from the flagship Defiant Terra. "Supreme Commander Velkrath, this is the Terran Defense Fleet. Your surrender is demanded immediately. You have exactly 60 seconds to begin evacuation procedures before we open fire." The Council Commander's response was immediate and predictable. "Impossible. Our intelligence confirmed that you built only one vessel. This is some primitive deception." "Your intelligence was incomplete," Admiral Kyung-Soo replied calmly. "While you were watching us build the Iron Resolve, we were using her construction process to develop rapid manufacturing techniques. Did you really think that a species which survived by building weapons would stop at building just one?" The truth was even more remarkable than Admiral Kyung-Soo admitted. In the months following the Iron Resolve's launch, Tae Yang Choi and his engineering teams had worked around the clock to establish hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. Using asteroid mining facilities and automated construction systems, they had managed to build 15 more ships of the same basic design. But these weren't exact copies of the Iron Resolve. Each ship had been customized based on lessons learned from analyzing the first vessel's combat performance. Some focused on stealth and infiltration, others on pure destructive capability, and still others on psychological warfare techniques that had proven devastatingly effective against Council forces. The Defiant Terra herself was the most advanced of the fleet, incorporating systems that pushed the boundaries of human engineering even further than the original design. Her antimatter reactor was actually stable enough to use as a controlled weapon, rather than just a suicide device, and her adaptive hull could reconfigure itself into entirely different ship configurations during combat. Commander Ji-eun Kim, who had survived the Iron Resolve's final mission only because she had been transferred to help establish the new fleet, served as Admiral Kyung-Soo's tactical coordinator. "Supreme Commander, you have 30 seconds remaining." Velkrath's response was to order the immediate destruction of all human vessels. The Council fleet opened fire with every weapon they possessed, filling space with energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and exotic matter disruptors. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a small moon, but the human ships weren't where the weapons struck. In the seconds before the Council opened fire, the Terran fleet had scattered using a coordinated movement pattern that Admiral Kyung-soo called the Swarm. Instead of fighting as individual vessels, the ships operated as a single organism, each one supporting the others while maintaining independent tactical flexibility. The battle that followed redefined what galactic civilization understood about warfare. The Council fleet, despite overwhelming numerical superiority, found themselves facing enemies that refused to follow any known tactical doctrine. The human ships didn't engage in long-range artillery duels or attempt to establish defensive formations. Instead, they dove directly into the Council fleet's midst, using their superior speed and maneuverability to turn the enemy's numbers against them. Council ships found themselves firing on their own allies as human vessels used their massive formations as cover. Captain Taemin Cho, commanding the stealth vessel Silent Vengeance, pioneered what became known as ghost strikes. His ship would appear behind enemy vessels, deliver devastating close-range attacks, then disappear back into cloak before return fire could be coordinated. The psychological effect of these invisible attacks was almost as damaging as the physical destruction they caused. Meanwhile, Captain So Young Park aboard the Relentless Fury demonstrated the effectiveness of human psychological warfare techniques. Her ship's weapons were calibrated not just to destroy enemy vessels, but to ensure that the process was as terrifying as possible for surviving crews. Energy beams would deliberately target non-critical systems first, allowing enemy crews to experience the horror of watching their ship die slowly while broadcasting their panic across all communication channels. The most shocking display came from Captain Jun-Ho Kim aboard the Unstoppable Force. His ship had been modified with what engineers called berserker protocols. When the vessel took damage, instead of retreating for repairs, it would deliberately overload its own systems to increase weapons output. The more damage the ship sustained, the more dangerous it became. During one engagement, the Unstoppable Force was surrounded by 12 Council heavy cruisers. Instead of attempting to escape, Captain Jun-Ho ordered his crew to abandon ship while he initiated a controlled reactor overload. But instead of immediately detonating, he used the ship's massive energy output to power weapon systems that were never meant to operate simultaneously. The result was a single human ship that fought with the firepower of an entire fleet, while its hull literally melted from the energy coursing through it. By the time the reactor finally went critical, the Unstoppable Force had destroyed all 12 enemy vessels and severely damaged 6 others. But the turning point of the battle came when Dr. Yoonbi Song, who had been rescued from Council imprisonment by a daring raid, provided crucial intelligence about enemy fleet coordination protocols. The Council ships were controlled by a centralized command system that allowed for perfect coordination, but created a critical vulnerability. Young-Suk Kim, now serving as Fleet AI Coordinator, developed a virus specifically designed to exploit the Council's command network. The virus didn't just disrupt communications, it actively turned enemy ships against each other by feeding them false targeting data and tactical instructions. Within minutes of the virus deployment, the massive Council fleet began tearing itself apart. Ships that should have been supporting each other instead found themselves locked in combat with their nearest allies. The carefully coordinated formations dissolved into chaos as individual vessels tried to identify friends from enemies in the growing confusion. Admiral Kyung-soo watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. All ships commence final assault. Target priority is enemy command vessels and anything that's still moving in formation. The human fleet's final attack was a masterpiece of coordinated violence. Each ship targeted specific enemy vessels while ensuring that their combined fire would create maximum psychological impact on surviving crews. The Defiant Terra led the assault, her adaptive weapon systems cycling through every type of destructive force that human science could devise. Supreme Commander Velkrath's flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Glory, found itself facing 3 human ships simultaneously. The council commander had assumed that his vessel's heavy armor and shields would make it invulnerable to primitive human weapons. He was wrong. The quantum torpedoes that had proven so effective against the original invasion fleet had been improved based on combat experience. The new versions didn't just phase through shields. They could actually use the enemy's own defensive systems to amplify their destructive power. When the torpedoes struck the Eternal Glory, they turned the ship's shields into a weapon that tore the massive vessel apart from within. As his flagship died around him, Supreme Commander Velkrath made one final transmission to the human fleet. "This is impossible. You are a primitive species that should have been harvested centuries ago. How can you defeat forces that have conquered the galaxy?" Admiral Kyung-Soo's response was broadcast across the entire battlefield, ensuring that every surviving council crew member would hear it. "Because you made one critical mistake. You assumed that being civilized made you strong, but civilization makes you soft, predictable, and weak. We're from a death world, and we remember what it takes to survive." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the council fleet. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered Earth's solar system, fewer than 50 escaped to carry word of the defeat back to the council's core worlds. In the aftermath, Earth faced a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization. They could have simply declared independence and focused on defending their own world. But President Sun Ja-han, who had replaced Dong Hyun Lee after his death in a council assassination attempt, had a different vision.